Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, as chair of the House Education Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor and as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with House Rule 67, the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. This is a subcommittee work session of the Education Committee to address and identify relevant information pertaining to the New Hampshire college and university system as proposed in HB 2. And that's chapter 188 Roman 1. You'll find that in the in HB 2 in on approximately, I don't have the specific page 50, I think it is. Going further, please note that there is no physical location for members of the public to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that all members of the subcommittee have the ability to communicate and contemporaneously during this meeting through the Zoom electronic meeting platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting by the Zoom platform or telephone. All necessary access information has been made available in the House calendar and through the electronic calendar on the General Court website. The notice for this meeting complies with House rules and RSA 91-A. Anyone who has a problem accessing the meeting should call 271-3600 or email hcs@ledge.state.nh.us. In the event of the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. At this time, I'd like to introduce the staff that are supporting us. We have Jennifer Four, who is our committee researcher. And please note that there will be no votes taken during this subcommittee meeting. We'll start the meeting by taking a roll call. And as I say your names, would you please, those subcommittee members that are present, would you please state that you're present, and if anybody else is in the room with you as required by the right to know law. Okay, so going down the agenda, obviously Rick Ladd is here. I'm speaking as right now. Also, is Mike Moffett here?
He hasn't checked in yet, Rick.
No, I haven't seen him either. Okay. Oliver Ford, Representative Ford.
Present in my office in Chester alone.
Thank you very much. Representative Mel Myler.
Mel Myler calling in from Kentucky, New Hampshire, and I'm here in my office alone.
Thank you. Representative Dave Luno.
Here in Hopkinton with Ozzy.
With Ozzy, great. There you go. Okay, and Representative Ellison.
I'm present. I'm here alone in my home in Concord.
Okay, that makes up the committee membership. There are 6 people on this committee. And today working with us, we have Dr. Ed McKay, past president of the University System of New Hampshire, and has been a strong advocate for education here in the state. And as I alluded to at the beginning, we are here today and on a very short time frame to consider and identify relevant information in regard to HB 2, the merger plans for the New Hampshire college and university system. We've invited Dr. McKay here today to try to provide us some insights as to his perceptions of a merger, how it will impact not only just the fiscal resources, but academic resources and policies of our system. So with that, I'd like to welcome Ed. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Representative Ladd. And for the record, I'm alone in my house in Durham, if that's important.
Thank you.
So let me start by saying I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to the subcommittee. This is a critical issue for the state of New Hampshire and all our residents. In reading the language of House Bill 2, it was primarily focused on the appointment process for this new super board, but it did cite 4 things that were the goals, and that is to provide an effective and efficient system of public higher education that is affordable and accessible. So I think we should look at that and see what the current status is, or the current context for that. First, the university system of New Hampshire has the highest graduation rate of any four-year public system in New England. The community college system has the highest graduation rate of any two-year public system in New England. So I think we can check the effectiveness box. In terms of efficiency, is documented by Kathy Preventure at a presentation last week to Division II. The university system has the lowest administrative costs of any public higher education system in New England. And I could not find comparable data for the community college system, but I think we all know how administratively lean they are. So I think if we can acknowledge that they're extremely efficient, so we can check that box. And moreover, the university system is engaged in a multi-year process, has been, for streamlining its backroom operations called FAR, Financial and Administrative Reorganization, that will, in the aggregate with other efforts, will produce savings of $70 million by fiscal year 2023. Their commitment to efficiency cannot be denied. We look at affordability and we look at the community college system in the last decade has increased its per credit hour rate from $210 to $215, a total of about 2% in a decade, not per year, over the whole time. So they're really committed to keeping that rate as low as possible. And in fact, other community college systems have caught up with it. The university system, given its rather, I think we acknowledge, low level of state subsidy or state appropriation support, has always had higher tuition rates, and it's functioned for a long time on a higher tuition rate, higher aid kind of philosophy. And for many decades, embraced the notion of, well, the out-of-state tuition rate should be higher because they provide a subsidy for the in-state students. Also, in-state rates should be higher. And we started this in 1980 on the advice of the governor at that time, that go with a high tuition, high rate approach. And we embraced a financial aid package that we called Meeting All Need. That Meeting All Need existed until the legislature, unfortunately, cut the state operating appropriation by 50% to the university system. But now it's reemerged in a different form, with only dealing with tuition in the granted guarantee. So again, the commitment is there to reducing the net price for students and sustaining that affordability. In terms of access, I think we know about the commitment of the community college in particular to individuals in high school. They had long-standing success with Running Start, and under Representative Ladd's leadership, appropriation was support for gain for dual and concurrent courses, STEM courses, in support of that. They also have the Early College Initiative, eStart. There's a number of ways that high school students in New Hampshire can gain college access, college credits, which are then fully transferable. Moreover, the community colleges, by their very nature, are nimble and respond to local business needs. And I would say that's true also of the university system. If you look at how these systems have been so effective and efficient for decades, it's because they've been responsive to student, local, state, and regional, in some cases, even national needs in terms of student services. So there's a lot of success there. I want to also mention one aspect about the university system's success in recruiting out-of-state students. That's been a tremendous economic benefit for the state of New Hampshire. How many of those students then stay in state and then feed our pipeline and help address our workforce issues? Not only is it their economic impact while they're here and paying tuition, and their parents and family are coming for events, but staying afterwards, but also it enables us to create the critical mass to offer many academic programs that would not otherwise been able to have been offered if we were strictly relying on our in-state population. Could we have chemical engineering? Could we have electrical engineering without 50% or more of the students being from out of state? I don't think you have a sufficient critical mass. So that's been critical. So when you look at the track record of both systems to date, I think it's been a success. And during this particular time, they're both dealing with the impact of COVID. As Kathy Preventure testified, $160 million in lost revenue and increased expenses were incurred as a result of COVID. And while there is state and federal aid and hopefully more to come, that's only going to cover a fraction. That just compounds it, the pressures on these systems at this time. So now let's look, if that's the context, what are the important questions that need to be raised in order to fully consider the issue before you, and are there alternative paths to take? Well, again, in House Bill 2, there are no specific issues raised. Let's identify what are the set of issues to be addressed and what are the desired outcomes. And why not provide the opportunity to the current independent boards to respond to those? It's not sufficient in my perspective to simply state the creation of a new super board will somehow accelerate resolution of perceived issues when they're not even clear what they are. The current boards really consist of dedicated individuals that do represent the experiences and skills needed to achieve the respective missions. The 23-person super board essentially is will be all individuals appointed through a political process, and we can walk through the 23 names. In each case of the nominations from the current university system or community college boards, each has to be individually approved by the governor before going to executive council. The governor nominates his own 5 individuals, that's 15. The other 8 are the governor, representative from the House, representative from the Senate, 4 commissioners, and finally the chancellor, who will be appointed by this new board. So essentially all political appointments. I think there is an existing mechanism that consideration should be given to how to examine this issue. There's a synergies group made up of representatives from the community college system and the university system that's been meeting since last July. They are collaborating on joint initiatives and with a particular focus on transfer issues. And this is really critically important because those issues have embedded in them the need for adherence to meeting learning outcome expectations for the respective academic institutions that would be accepting these credits and transfer for either on an institutional level or a specific program level. So if the real issue that's being raised, can we facilitate transfer in one manner or another? Let's have a group of individuals who have the expertise and the experience with regard to those academic issues deal with it. I do not think there's really any opportunity for meaningful cost savings because of the initiatives, because of documented already efficient operations and the initiatives all underway, in particular at the university system. There is a mechanism in place to have the synergies group report to a legislative body, the Public Higher Education Study Committee. And if you read the charter of that committee, it says explicitly the responsibility to study the operation, goals and purposes, organization, size, and financing of public higher education in the state. Isn't that exactly what this is about? So why not charge the synergies group or some entity to make a recommendation or to analyze whatever the specific issues that are being raised and have that entity then recommend to the Public Higher Education Study Committee their findings or report those findings. That, again, the Public Higher Education Study Committee is the entity that was established to hold the public higher education systems accountable. And then based on that report, then the Public Higher Education Study Committee can make recommendations to the legislature about what actions, if any, should be taken and what the timeline is to accomplish any measurable outcomes that need to be addressed. So again, let's identify what are the issues that need to be addressed. Specifically, what are the outcomes? What are the metrics? What are the quantifiable metrics that need to be met? And then have an entity with the expertise report back to the Public Higher Education Study Committee on the timeline for doing maybe the dollars that will be needed to accomplish those also. And that seems to be a more reasonable process than creating a super board and no process for the subsequent filling of those seats. The recommendation, in my view, seems to put the cart before the horse. And I'm just suggesting that there may be a better way to approach addressing whatever issues may be out there. And thank you, Representative Lynn, and I'm glad to answer any other questions. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Representative Ladd, I think you have. Yeah,
You're muted.
I had myself muted because I got a little 2-year-old running around out back there, and I wanted to not interfere with what you were saying, but I'm sure there's many questions which we have. And so are you good with just participating with us for the next hour or so and helping us out with some of our discussion and questions?
I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. So I'll start out with one question here. And one of the issues that has been at stake here and is it pops up in everybody's mind initially is our tuition costs for the community college system are significantly lower than that of the 4-year schools. Even within the 4-year schools, we have different tuitioning costs. In your working previously with various college and university systems, and I'm sure you have, and even within, in the effort to do these types of studies, like consolidating our structure and our organization, have we seen the tuition costs changed in those districts which have gone in those states where they've moved forward to get one overseeing board, or do those disparities between costs still exist?
I think in general, the disparities in cost still exist. However, let me say because of those efforts to merge, there is often pressure on the faculty and staff in the community college system, typically, I'm generalizing here, to raise the compensation levels and to equalize those things. So costs actually may increase on that, increasing the pressure to equalize in some ways the tuition. I'm more familiar with the efforts within New England, although again, the NCHEMS report that was referenced earlier does have some national information, and there has been in that case some national examples. But I think it would be critical, and again, the board, if there was such a merger, that super board would have to have the authority to set tuition, and one would hope, but again, it's unclear, that they would be respectful of the need of the community college system in particular to maintain the lowest possible price, because it's not only the recent high school graduates, all those adults and part-time learners. And we can talk about the financial aid available through the 529 Commission and others that will help address that. So I think some kinds of differentiation in the price is absolutely critical going forth, because there's different populations being served. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open it up to the committee to ask questions right now. Representative Myler.
Thank you, Representative Ladd. Dr. McKay, one of the questions that we deal with, you currently have vacancies in both the chancellors of both systems. They're in I believe they're currently in a search process to identify qualified applicants, et cetera. What's your recommendation if this were to go forward? If we were to take your recommendation to take some time to really look at this and have a significant study looking at the vision of higher education for the state, and how does this potential merger fit that particular vision? What's your suggestions on the search process that's currently taking place within both systems, and what would your recommendations be regarding that? That's one of my questions.
That is challenging, and to be candid, I think it's going to impact the ability to hire the best person for this if there's not a clear commitment to maintaining the separate systems. If it's in question, then I would recommend, as a result of your deliberations and decisions throughout this legislative process, if the ultimate answer on whether to merge or not is still in question, then I would recommend for the next year hiring another interim, because I think it will make it more difficult to sustain the commitment of an individual for what typically is at least a 4 or 5 year expectation because of this cloud that would be hanging over it. So until that is resolved, I think there will be an impact, unfortunately.
So you're basically saying that there should be a suspension of any further search for these for replacements of these two positions then.
Yes, I think that would be my recommendation. If I was a candidate for any position like this, I would want to know that I have the ability over the next 4 or 5 years to make a difference. And if that's not clear, then I think that may in some way restrict the applicant pool. Now, I know there's been a lot of interest expressed in these positions, but that may have been prior to the announcement of the proposed merger.
Another question I guess I have too is that it appears if you look at the data, particularly with the community college, that there is a growing reliance on the use of adjunct professors vis-a-vis that of full-time. And now, granted, there needs to be a balance. I understand that because in some ways you want to have practitioners in the field working with students. But on the other hand, it looks like perhaps one of the ways that the tuition, at least at the community colleges, has been maintained at a lower rate is because they use the adjunct professors, which obviously costs less. There's not as much overhead, there's not as much benefits, et cetera. So one of the concerns I have is that the reliance on adjuncts vis-a-vis that of full-time professors at the university level. Do you have any thoughts about that as it relates to this combining these institutions?
Well, let me just say as a generality throughout New England and nationally, you're seeing greater reliance on adjunct, part-time, sometimes full-time individuals that are hired as instructors, for example. And I think part of it is a cost saving, but also very importantly, it does enable the institution to be more nimble, to respond to emerging areas of interest and provide specific expertise in those areas. So it's a much appreciated and valued component to the overall faculty load. I do think the reality going forward, given the demographic headwinds that the state of New Hampshire and all of New England are facing, is that I don't see any expansion in the number of tenure track faculty, or nominal expansion, and probably through this period, sustaining that number of adjunct faculty. Is that the best for the longer term? No, but I think the financial reality facing is that is where we are at this point, and where we're likely to be, unfortunately, for the next 10 or 15 years.
Thank you.
Representative Ellison,
Okay, let me go. Rick is taking care of the 2-year-old, I think.
No, I just had to answer the phone the other end. So yes, go ahead, Art.
Thank you. And thank you, Ed, for being here today. I would start by saying I share Mel's concern about the numbers of adjunct professors in the community college system. But my question, I guess, getting down into the weeds on this is, the Synergies group, is there a timeline for them to continue to sort of finish their work? And the second question is, given what's transpired in the budget and the reason we're all talking, are they fairly nimble to start to maybe refocus their work in a different way because of the urgency of the situation?
I do not know of a deadline or timeline for the completion of their work. I would say this would be their priority and they would refocus. And for example, you could ask them to complete an analysis of the issues identified and the specific outcomes desired. Once those are made by, I think, the end of this calendar year, by sometime in the fall, so that report could be received by the Public Higher Education Study Committee. And I think it would be incumbent upon both of the independent boards now to ensure that the representatives on that synergy group address that issue as their or issues as their top priority. So I believe Representative Ellison, it can and should be take precedent over other issues they're dealing with now, especially if they may relate, as I believe that'd be the case, to the academic area, because there are mechanisms already in place with regard to the finance and administrative structure.
Thank you.
Ed, I have a sort of a follow-up question when we were talking about the position of chancellor and that you have held. And in speaking with our two past chancellors, Ross Cattell and Todd Leach, I was informed that the chancellor position in this state is not as strong as it is in some other states in terms of statutory authority. Is that in our restructuring process? Obviously, we're still, I would think, going to need to have chancellors. Or is there any need for us to address that position, which the duties of the chancellor and the authority of the chancellor versus those of the presidents of the various institutions? So the question was, for you, Ed, Dr. McKay, the authority of the chancellor versus the authority of the presidents of the colleges and the universities, do we have to look at those job descriptions and responsibilities if we're going to go through a restructuring process?
So I'll attempt to talk through it. And without getting too much in the weeds, I believe that based on personal experience and my observations in other systems, the chancellor of a system ought to be the CEO, and that all the presidents ought to report to that chancellor. That was the procedure and internal in the university system until 2013. I left at that time because I believed it was not in the best long-term interest of the functioning of the system to have the presidents report directly to the board. I understand, and Todd dealt with that. So now I think there is some revisiting of that. And so again, my personal bias on this is that there ought to be a single CEO that the board can hold accountable for the results of the performance of the institutions and their respective CEOs. I do not believe in statute. That's a problem. I think that's an internal problem to each of the governing boards if not sufficient latitude and authority is given to the chancellor.
Thank you very much, Dr. McKay. Are there questions from the committee? I see Dr. Ford.
Yes, Dr. McKay, I'm a former ACE fellow, and I've been involved in some of these merger things, Minnesota in particular, as well as Massachusetts. One of the things that bothered me most in the NCHIMS report was the fact that when they merged into systems of one system, only one, shall we say, category wound up getting the real attention and everyone else sort of fell aside.
Yep.
That concerned me a great deal, because then they go on to ask for something like system-wide accreditation. And I think that if you get too far beyond the institution, you don't know what you're accrediting.
Representative Ford, I share your concerns, and I think that is a particular issue that needs to be addressed as part of your deliberations with regard to this issue. I think the community college is committed to its mission. I think the individuals on that board are committed to it and addressing local business needs, and I do worry that that would not always be the case if the systems are merged. I mean, in the university system, we worked hard to make sure that each institution within the system had a distinctive aspect to it. UNH was a land grant, sea grant, space grant institution, Plymouth Regional Public University, Keene Coplac, which is a public liberal arts college, Granite State was focused on adult learners throughout the. So we wanted to maintain the distinctiveness of each of those entities. And I do worry is you create a larger system that some of those will be less attention will be paid to those distinctive needs, and that one institution may have a disproportionate influence on the others.
Thank you.
So I'd like to follow that up with either, the past president of Lowell or the past chancellor for the university system. Now, do we have some evidence out there that where these consolidations have been made and what occurs or occurred is similar to what Dr. Ford was referencing? Is that as something that is quite possibly going to happen where the mission of the community college system becomes lost, or the mission to engage in certification pathways which build to skills, is that going to get lost versus the traditional 4-year degree, master's, and going on with doctoral programs?
I think that's a risk. I have characterized this initiative as high risk, low reward, and that would be one of the risks that I would identify.
Okay, thank you. One other question. I don't see people putting their hands up, so if you put your hands up, I can unsee it, but we have a declining demographic in this state. Obviously, K through 12 population has just dropped off significantly. We all know that, and we've all thrown around the figures. And so that certainly shrinks the pool of eligibility or pool of students which are going to go on to a system here in New Hampshire. And of course, we have the issue of competition that's occurring from other states around us, namely, Massachusetts and Maine. So in dealing with this, we can deal with it as Vermont maybe did by increasing the number of out-of-state students. So we start having, the money come in through the tuition. That I think is a catch-22 for Vermont. They're at the point now where there's up close to 70-80% out-of-state students, and it's still in economic trouble. We also have the situation where we may have duplication of various departments from Keene to Plymouth to UNH. Have we looked at consolidation of programs to certain locations within our state so we can eliminate some of this duplicity? So demographics is causing some issues. Are there any ways to resolve this issue without having to change our whole structure and organization, Ed?
I believe there are. Let me just say, you cited UVM, which it does have, last I saw, 78% of its students are out of state. But that's separate from the Vermont college and community college system, which is really struggling. They merged Linden and Johnson State Colleges into Northern Vermont University. Now they're merging that with Castleton. And so there's a lot of issues there, and they do not have that proportion of out-of-state students. Again, the university system has been the residential campus has been very effective in doing it, but it will be a continuing challenge. And as I mentioned, that part of the critical issue here is this critical mass to offer programs. So I think one of the things to look to in the future, and some campuses are beginning to do, the University of Maine system is beginning to explore that, to have a program hosted primarily at one campus and one department, but then offered in multiple sites so that students have access to programs wherever they may attend. I think with the pivoting to various methods of academic program delivery last spring, there is much more comfort and expertise with regarding to deliver programs online, especially from our traditionally residential campuses than there had been previously. So I think that actually has opened the door to more of these opportunities. And if enrollments at a particular residential campus decline, but you can offer students on that residential campus the same access or maybe greater access to other academic programs that may be primarily housed at another institution. I think that is an opportunity to be explored. And I think we'll see more of that. That is program sharing, if you will, or ways to enable individuals throughout the state to gain greater access to programs that may be primarily hosted at one campus or another.
Thank you. Art.
Thank you, Rick. Ed, just a question about financing, which obviously we don't have an answer to yet, but there appears to be some feeling on the part of some people that a merger will result in cost savings down the road. Just your view of sort of that issue and how possible that is, and yeah, how possible that would be based on your experience within the state and your knowledge of other states.
I thank you, Representative Ellison, for that question. And as documented previously, the university system and the community college system already have very low administrative costs. And the university system is engaged in this FAR effort, finance and administrative reorganization, to further reduce those costs. I think whatever incremental savings would be available through this merger are de minimis. I mean, I think no one should expect that there be any substantive financial savings. I just want to be candid about that. I see no evidence for that.
Thank you.
Transferability of credits. Okay, go ahead, Dave. You go first.
Yeah, no worries, Rick. I was going to ask about that too, but I'll hold off on that one because I know that's one of the things that I think the governor was talking about specifically. But I wanted to ask you, Dr. McKay, about other sort of, I don't want to call them sort of accessory, issues that might come up during a merger, but things like system foundations and things like that. What sort of considerations have to sort of be looked at about those types of things?
Thank you. Just for the record, I chair the Foundation for New Hampshire Community Colleges, and several members of that board, we met yesterday, are appointed from the governing board, the Board of Trustees of the Community College System. Now, if there is no longer a governing board, what are the impact? And my personal view is, because there has not been a history of advancement and development in the community college system, it's absolutely essential that function, that is development, a system-wide foundation for the community college, be in place, because I don't believe another entity, UNH or any, could serve those needs. And the amount of time that's spent with the advisory committees on the different campuses, the community college campuses, going there, and trying to build an expectation for development and support, it is critical. So those are the kind of the issues, the unintended consequences, I think, that could result from a rush to merger.
Okay, thanks. So are there other things that would sort of fall into that category of?
The law school at UNH has its own, advisor. There are UNH Manchester. I think there are other entities that have different relationships and different appointments coming from the governing board. I have not seen the most recent list of that, so I shouldn't state that because I'm not that familiar with the current. But there are relationships there, and again, being built with the local communities that host these campuses and their businesses. And if you look at I'll pick on the community colleges again, what they've done in terms of relationship with local businesses and securing support for students during COVID-19 time and responding to specific training and credentialing that's going to be helpful as these businesses reemerge. It's remarkable. Will that attention still be paid if there was only one entity? I don't know. That's a question.
Okay, great. No, thanks very much, Ed.
I've got a question regarding, I know that there are labor contracts at Keene State, at UNH, at the community college. What's your experience in how those collective bargaining agreements are merged in something like this?
I think there is likely to be impact down the road. I believe it was something like 10 or 11 different union agreements between the two systems. And it's hard for me to imagine that if you're representing a group of employees at X, you don't look at what's the provisions for benefits at Y and saying, well, if those are better than what we have, shouldn't we be equalized under a single system? So I do think, again, that may be one of those unintended consequences that that will result if there was a single system created.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's going to be a very difficult one with the compensation and terms and conditions of various contracts. And I can't help but think it's going to end up with having some more costs to try to equalize that out or try to come to if we are going to go that direction, towards some kind of a single contract for certain groups.
Well, and then the other, it's also complex because you've got different international unions representing various different contracts. So it's not like you've got one universal representative throughout the system. So you've got those entities would have to be dealt with from that standpoint.
Yeah. Yes, Representative Ford.
More than just that problem, which I don't think is an impossible problem. It's just simply having to go through the process, being a former union president myself. It is just, you're going to have to sit down and negotiate all those. The more difficult thing in making equations with people who have apparent equal status, if you will, as a professor, is that they don't have equal status in the marketplace.
Right.
And so now you're getting people who are in high demand in industry wanting to be paid more than someone who just teaches that subject, quote unquote. And so you get into all of those kinds of rather nasty internecine kind of fights, and they are nasty. I know, I've lived through a couple of them.
So for Representative, how long does it take to get resolution on these?
Some people never forgive.
Okay.
But you do finally reach a working agreement because you don't have any choice, and they don't have any choice. We've all got to work together somehow. And so you sort of hammer out how you're going to do that. But you have to do it. They're almost all individual.
Yeah. The one thing I'd say with my experience with the university system, and it may be an issue here, is that when the university system was created, employees at Keene and Plymouth were part of the state union. And so which is a defined benefit program, not a defined contribution. So there was a phase out program, and eventually all employees in the university system became part of our 403B, which is a defined contribution program.
Right.
But I think a similar issue would exist here, is that a number of individuals in the community college system are part of the state pension program, which will defined benefit, which makes it more problematic to negotiate a resolution on that because of the embedded benefits and the time that one may have in that particular program. But I agree with you, it's possible. And I also agree with you, the faculty salaries for business faculty versus English faculty is an issue.
A question for you, Ed. Some people equate this, and I've mentioned, I think in the committee several times, it's like marching down the football field on your 50-yard line. You want to get to the end zone with a Hail Mary pass rather than going incrementally down the field. In looking at our 4-year system right now, Granite State, Plymouth, Keene, UNH, to the best of your knowledge, have we had any kind of an effort to move forward in merging those systems into a system, whereas a course title in one situation in Keene is the same title in another Plymouth State, and you get the same 3 credits and they're transferable between departments. I understand Maine is trying to work through something like this right now. They have all those satellites they expanded in the 70s and 80s to Augusta, to Lewiston, to Presque Isle, to all over. And now they're finding they can't afford to keep those locations afloat. So this transferability of credit is really important. Do we merge that first amongst one level and then try to go to the larger scope of structure and organization?
I think that's a good question. I think that would be a question to the synergies group, how to approach a lot of that. There has been adoption of a common learning management system, but I think in terms of the actual titling, and you also find there's variances now. There's 3 credit courses at Keene and other places, 4 credit at UNH and so forth. So part of it is there's a number of things to resolve with that. And I think if that is a specific concern with regard to students transferring, and I don't know that it hasn't been addressed to a great extent, then it should be. The creation of a common student information system across both systems would be a very big project and would cost a lot of money. So I think that, and take time. So I think that is the kind of question that could be posed, and it would take some research, and then you'd have more information to help you to define what the best path forward is.
Representative Ford.
Yes, Dr. McKay, when I was at Lowell, where I was not the president, by the way, I was the assistant to the president.
No, okay.
But I was the president at Southwest Minnesota State.
Okay, no.
Just to clarify my bio here. But we ran in, when we were merged with the community colleges, we ran into a situation in which our introductory math course, for example, was being taught at the community college. And if you looked at the course description, and their course description was exactly 1/3 of what we described in our course that we taught.
Yeah.
And so we finally had to have said, we're going to go by the competency achieved in the course. We'll give you the credits as free electives.
Right.
We're going to go by fulfilling requirements based on what you did in the course. And that proved to be pretty reasonably acceptable.
Yeah, Representative Ford raises a good issue, and that is, what are the learning outcomes? I know you have an individual who really has expertise coming to a future in this arena with regard to accreditation, learning outcomes, and so forth, coming to a future meeting, and that would be a good conversation to have with her. But you're absolutely right. There are learning outcomes for specific programs and institutions, and if you're accepting transfer, and what were the learning outcomes from those particular courses, and how do they mesh them with the program requirements at your host institution? So yes, those are, that's why it's difficult to find simple answers to a lot of these transfer issues, unless you do a 2+2 program, which do exist a lot of places, but associate degree and accepting that package, and that's helpful. But if you're talking about individual courses or taking 3 courses here and 1 course here, there are a lot of challenges in that. Because again, the institution needs to protect its integrity with regard to ultimately awarding of its degrees, and making sure its learning outcomes are met for individuals who they're granting the degree to. So as you suggested, that analysis needs to be done.
Yeah, can I do a follow-up on that one, Rick?
Sure, go for it, Dave.
So thanks, and Oliver, that was an excellent question, and I think Dr. McKay's response on that. I've served I think 20+ years on the UNH Engineering Technology Program Board and on the NHTI Advisory Board, and so there's always been a very, very close relationship in a 2+2 program where students in engineering technology at the community colleges have a seamless transfer into UNH. And when I began on it, it was UNH at Durham. It's now UNH at Manchester, but it's been a very, very successful program. But it wasn't at all easy to make sure that students, particularly in the math courses, had what they need coming out of high school, getting into, going to NHTI, for example, and then transferring into the engineering technology program at UNH. And so even for one very well-established program, it required a tremendous amount of effort on the part of, essentially faculty to make that happen. And I guess, it sounds like one of the concerns would be, how do you go about making that happen on a broader basis? And I don't know if that would be easier under one system or what. So.
Yeah, based on the NCHEMS report, I'm not sure it would be easier under one system. I think that's one of the things they cite is the expectation was it was going to be easier, but when you get down to the nitty gritty, if you will, it's just as you suggest. You have to look at those learning outcomes and align those so that the individual earning the degree has met those expectations.
No, thanks very much, Dr. McKay.
Art, you have a question, Art?
Yes, I do, please. Thank you, Rick. And you may not know this one because it gets down into the weeds. I understand some of the issues between transferring credits from the community college system up into the college university system. And this question is probably for somebody at the community college system. Are there differences between courses and credits from the individual community college campuses? For instance, on Math 101, is Math 101 pretty much the same across the board at the community college?
It is a question that would be better addressed to Chancellor Hewart. But based on my prior conversations with Chancellor Gittell, I know that enormous amount of work was being done across the system to equalize those or to resolve those kind of issues. So I don't want to say definitively that many of those issues have been addressed, but I know they were being addressed. And but whether they're resolved or not, I just don't know.
Thank you.
Just to follow up to where Art's coming from, and I've heard others speaking the same way here. We've heard from Beth Dorian over at the community college system that a high percentage of students leaving high school that are coming into the community college, they, as well as adults, are not prepared for mathematics.
Yeah.
And we at times have had as high as 60% of those incoming individuals require remedial mathematics. When I've talked before to several college presidents of our 4 years, I don't want to mention names of those presidents, they've indicated to us on the committee that they don't have remediation at the 4-year level.
That's true.
We have it at the 2-year level. But of that 60% that come in, 50% never come out with a degree. I'm fearful that if we lose this access that we have through the community college system, that we're going to lose a number of students that have hopes of getting a degree and a higher level of education. Would this program, in your perspective, Ed, be somewhat lost if we started merging everything, our academic program, our accreditation of the various 2 years and the 4 years into one accreditation, if that's the route we go? Or are we going to lose something?
Well, if you go that route, one accreditation, that's a very big jump. And especially if you would combine 2-year institutions and 4-year institutions. University of Maine system is just looking at all their 4-year institutions and the unified accreditation. And again, that's a good question for one of your future guests. But let me say, and I want to applaud the work that the community college system has done in embracing what they call Complete College America initiatives. And Beth, in not having students take these remedial courses that don't count for credit towards a degree, but what they have done is expanded them so they're remedial plus, if you will, and they have extra time, and that they convert those into courses that then, by measuring the learning outcomes again, they can count towards satisfying degree requirements for the 2-year degree, and then if there's a 2+2 transfer. So it really is helping so many of those students who may come to the community colleges not fully prepared to succeed. And that's one of the critical aspects of the community college, again, being able to work with those students and provide more attention and hands-on support maybe than would reside otherwise. And again, some of the initiatives that have been embraced by the community college system have, I think, been very effective at elevating students so that they are prepared to succeed at post-secondary education.
Thank you. Yes, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. So, Ed, something that's come up, certainly it's come up at NHTI, but I think it's probably come up at other community colleges too, where there is a unique opportunity to possibly provide a baccalaureate degree at the community college level in a course or in a sorry, in a program of studies that isn't offered, let's say, through the university system. And I guess I was wondering, is that something that that could have an improve the degree attainment potential for students under the existing separate systems or under a combined system?
That's a good question. I'll express my personal bias here. I would rather, in those circumstances where there's identification for a need of a bachelor's program then I would prefer collaboration with the university system, one of the institutions that's best aligned to serve that need, and to partner with that, including the potential delivery on the NHTI campus of that 4 full years, because as you well know, many of those individuals may be place-bound and not able to travel to Plymouth or wherever to complete a degree. So I think, again, this is the kind of collaboration I think they're seeking through the Synergies Group and other initiatives. And I'm optimistic about those producing those kinds of results. And whether that happens under a merger or not, I don't know.
Okay.
In the past, Ed, I've talked with Todd and asked him the question, should the community college system be issuing a 4-year degree? And of course, he was objecting to that, but I talked to Ross Cattell, and they've oftentimes come before the education committee saying, well, they'd like to have some programs which can engage, a 4-year certificate. Would you see this happening with a merger?
I don't know if that's a necessary outcome. And again, my bias is to have each of the systems ideally maintain their distinctive features and focus. I also think it begins to blur that line about compensation for faculty going back there. And it again, may create unintended consequences and challenges down the road if you start to initiate the awarding of 4-year degrees on the community college campuses. So I think there are issues embedded in that would take some time to look at.
Mel.
Well, along that same line, one of the things that was cited by the governor was the competition for students. With a diminishing number of students in school and graduating, et cetera, is a competition of how do you attract students to come. And one of the points you make in your presentation is the UNH system helps to get people from out of state to come into the state. But how do you look at the issue of the question of a student competing to get students on campus?
I think that's an excellent question. And I think that some of the dual admission programs that Great Bay Community College has with UNH, I think more initiatives like that. So you can, the university system and the community college system could market and communicate to New Hampshire high school students, here's a pathway for you. Here's a lower cost pathway for your first 2 years at community college where you may be able to commute to. and then all your credits are transferred to the 2+2 program, and that you're able to complete that degree with relatively low levels of student debt. And again, financial aid is particularly important here in providing that aid. I've mentioned before the granted guarantee. I think there are ways to market this capacity to earn 2 and 4-year degrees at a lower price tag, which makes collectively the public systems in New Hampshire more competitive with out-of-state offerings. And I think that's exactly the kind of initiative that should be embraced, and I think is being embraced, because we've seen some examples of it, but expanded. And I think it would be very helpful to say, I share those concerns. As many of you know, I've been involved in what they call 65 by 25 for a number of years. So I am concerned about our future workforce needs.
But with that said, the merger, this could happen even without any kind of a merger then.
Absolutely. It does exist. The dual.
Yeah, right, exactly. You
exactly.
just need to ramp it up, is what you're saying. You just ramp up the opportunity.
Yeah, ramp it up. And maybe special support from like Representative Ladd secured state support for dual and concurrent enrollment in STEM courses. You know, that was an important initiative to have students earn college level credit for STEM courses before going on. Maybe there's a special support appropriation for marketing of these pathways, that let them identify the pathways. Whatever, I do agree it's an issue and we need to work on it.
Ed, can you talk a little bit about granted guarantee? Where does the funding come from for granted guarantee? I thought that was only for 4-year school.
I'm sorry, it is only offered by the residential campuses within the university system in New Hampshire. I wasn't clear about that. But what they did, what the university system did 2 years ago, I believe, they said, if you're a graduate of the community college system and you meet the criteria, which is you're Pell eligible and you're going full time, and then we will extend that to you. And basically what it says, it provides last dollar support such that there's no net cost for tuition. So if you're Pell eligible and you've got 2 or 3, whatever let's say it's $10,000 or $11,000 for tuition at Plymouth, whatever the current figure, maybe 13,000. Let's say 13,000, and your Pell grant is 4,000. Through other packages, including the unique endowment payout and others, that institutional aid, the institution will commit to so that your full need is met for tuition. It doesn't cover room and board, but that's an important marketing piece. And again, I'm hopeful that those kinds of opportunities can be expanded. But you're right, it only goes to the 3 residential university system campuses now.
So Ed, where's the revenue come from for the university to have these funds to help a kid with granted guarantee? Is it out of the assets that the 4 years have that the community college does not have?
Yes, that's true. Sorry, my phone's ringing in the background, but yes, let me just yes, the university system awards a great deal of financial aid to both in-state and out-of-state students. And in prioritizing this initiative, they looked at the assets they had, including, again, the payout from the unique endowment and others sources, other grants and gifts that have been to provide scholarship funds, and they've awarded those. So let me just try to get rid of it again. So yes, it's internal money. And
thank you. Oliver.
Thank you. I have advocated for years now with students that the easiest way to reduce the cost of education is to not interrupt it with summers. Simply go straight through. And you can get out in 2.5 years with a bachelor's degree. Would that be something that, with community colleges in concert and so forth, it might be possible to get more people to think in those terms?
I absolutely agree. And I think that's a wonderful idea. And let me go back, though, to the fact that some high school students are earning significant number of college credits now through the various community college initiatives. And in fact, I just saw yesterday a preview of what will be announced soon. A student graduating from high school in New Hampshire will earn her associate's degree several months after graduating from high school. So that is exactly the kind of thing we're trying to promote, earning degrees.
Is anybody able to hear Ed right now?
No.
No, I guess, looks like everything stopped over there.
Am I
I've
back
been
now?
having,
Oh, you're
You're
back.
back now.
Sorry, I apologize. I have some internet connection issues here. So I'm not sure, but I'm embracing the notion and cited the fact that, again, we have an example of a student who
I've been
will be
having that
graduating.
problem too this morning.
So a student who will be graduating high school and earning an associate's degree soon thereafter. So I think that is the kind of thing we could market and should market.
Incidentally,
Go ahead,
in
Mel.
Castleton in Vermont,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question.
I'm sorry, I was going to confirm what you said about Vermont earlier. I was on a Castleton's NEASC visit, and they're foreign students, i.e. from New York, just quit coming after a while. They would come there for 2 years and ski, and then they would go back home and get their degree from a local place.
Yeah.
And eventually that just quit happening, and it was very bad on them for enrollments.
Ed, when you were a chancellor for the university system, and you must have been seeing some of the departments within the university system at various college university locations, which were being funded through revenues via other departments. In other words, the student attendance in these programs is shrinking, sort of like our law school now in the center part of the state here. Are there any programs that you know of that that need consolidation, or maybe it's time to say that maybe we'll have that done through reciprocity with another state school in another state? Like Maine has their physical therapy kids coming to UNH. Maine doesn't have such a program. Is there room for us to try to have a little bit more reciprocity with and work agreements with some of these other state universities?
Well, yes, and in fact, the vehicle exists for that, and that's the New England Board of Higher Education, or NEBI. NEBI has this regional tuition program where if a program is not offered in your state, you can get the in-state rate to participate in that program in that state. For example, there's no pharmacy program in the state of New Hampshire, so New Hampshire students can go to Rhode Island to go for their pharmacy program. The NEBI program has been established for 20 some years and is a viable vehicle for allowing students those opportunities. Again, that's one reason we wanted to attract a lot of out-of-state students, and so to New Hampshire residential campuses, so that we had the capacity to offer as many programs that we thought met the state needs. But as we look collectively at the demographics across New England, you may see more of those situations.
Rick, I'm going to have to drop now.
Okay, Dave.
But I want to thank you very much, and thank you very much, Ed. It's great to see you this morning, and we'll see you back on this real soon. So everyone have a great weekend. All right, thanks.
Thank you very much, Dave. Good luck this afternoon. Alumni associations, Ed, are extremely important, and alumni associations at UNH are probably, I'm just making a guess, are much stronger than they are at NHTI.
NHTI does a good job, by the way, with theirs. So let me say, of all the community colleges, they may have the strongest. I think they do have the strongest association, and they do a good job.
So do alumni associations, and of course, this is a perception, or more of a guess, if they see that their university is going to come underneath the roof of a larger global system structure, do you think there would be a chance that you would see fewer gifts in terms of finances going to that institution, or alumni contributions are very important to UNH?
Yes, I don't see that having much impact on UNH because I know it's fairly distinct. But let me say, I think Pennsylvania is looking at some of those issues now, consolidating in 2 different cases, 3 campuses into 1. I think most donors' identification is with particular institution, not with a system. So what we have found over the years is that while you want to support collective fundraising by backroom operations, such as the Foundation for New Hampshire Community Colleges does, and the asking primarily, if not almost exclusively, but primarily has to come from the particular institution that has the affiliation with that individual or that association. And individuals do give back to institutions. Yes, there are some gifts received at a system level, and they're very appreciated. But I have to say the great majority, I think that is if there was some blending of brand and identification, then I think there's a potential to lose some aspect of giving.
You mentioned the Pennsylvania higher education system. That's an interesting system. They have the Commonwealth system of higher education, which involves 14 different institutions. However, one of those institutions, Penn State, has 23 units within it. And so they have a separate system called the Penn State higher education system. And within their system, I always thought Temple University was a private in Philadelphia, but that's part of the Commonwealth system. So
does the University, so does the University of Pittsburgh. University of Pittsburgh, and Temple, and Penn State essentially functions independently. Then they have a state university system, as you said, with 14 institutions, and that's where 2 pairs of 3. There's 3 institutions being combined in one case, 3 others in another case. Yeah, very different
model that works. Of course, that might be a question for Don Burks too, because he was a chancellor within that system. Right. I'll wait and hold that one.
Okay.
Are there further questions of Ed right now? He's been with us now for an hour and 15 or 20 minutes. It's quite a lengthy period.
Representative Ellison may have a question.
Yes. Art.
You're muted.
You're muted, Art.
That's better. Thank you. Going back to the math question, I'm pretty familiar with how the community college system has made those changes with students who come in without the needed math skills. And I applaud them for that, because by putting those into the credit situation, then students are not pulling off their Pell Grant money without getting any credits. Given that situation, and I just want to be a little clear, how does UNH or Plymouth or Keene handle that if the same student comes in who has some limited math? Do you have some sense of that?
No, as Representative Ladd said earlier, the position of the university system has been historically, and I admit I don't have real current information, but their position was there were no remedial courses there, and that students sought support from the faculty members or maybe from other students to help them through that. I think that was more challenging for them.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Thank you.
I have one last question. I've been sort of holding off on it for you, Ed. It deals with the new governing board. And you spoke about this at the very beginning. And when I look at the community college system now, they're very closely aligned with regional business. When I look at the university system, New Hampshire, and that board of trustees, I see a number of folks which are government related, various departments, represented from the House and the Senate by way of the president and the speaker. you have folks from the various Department of Agriculture, on all the departments. It's a much different makeup of a board than you have at the community college level. And you spoke about the new board being politically appointed. Does that, and what you're trying to say is that we might be missing that element of tying our education to current changing needs of our business community by not having business-oriented people on the overarching board?
Well, I think that is a concern. Again, one of the individuals I know that you're going to have soon has just written a paper or a publication for the Association of Governing Boards, which talks about the composition and the challenges to governing boards now, and do they have the individuals in that board with the right set of experiences and skills and perspectives to enable that respective board and institution to move forward in a strategic manner. So it's unclear to me, given the appointment process that's embedded in House Bill 2, how there'll be assurances that all those perspectives in terms of the local, state and regional economic needs and different needs are going to be addressed in that composition. There's no assurance of that at this point. Now, maybe the intent, but again, it's not possible to infer that based on the information that's currently available.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for Ed at this time? Yes, Representative Myler.
Thank you, Rick. One of the questions I have, you have the UNH, at least its brand is the leading in research institution in the state. How does that brand then relate to the vision of the community college, which is different than that brand? How do you see the merging of those two different visions coming together?
I think the branding would have to, under any scenario, must remain distinct. I think the UNH appropriately brands itself as a Carnegie One research institution, attracts students from across the country and internationally. And again, with its land grant, sea grant, space grant designations, offers the opportunity for students to do high-end research. And again, that experience is different than what may appeal to other individuals. And whatever happens has to ensure that those institutions, whatever their respective mission is, are able to continue to market that. If it's blurred in any way, that will potentially put it at risk, their ability to successfully continue to do that recruitment.
Ed, I'm looking at some of the structures that Connecticut has with their academic, the Connecticut Board of Regents for Higher Education. They have both financial and academic authority. Do you have any familiarity with Connecticut in terms of, do they still have their boards for the community college and the university system below this Regents Board?
They may have advisory boards for those different campuses. I do not believe they have any governing boards any longer, but I'm not sure. And of course, UConn is not part of that system. So it's just the former state universities, colleges, and the community college that were put into that board. I think, again, Susan Hewart or others that have had experience in that system would be better able to tell you about some of their experiences.
Okay.
Going through that process, which has been challenging.
So UConn is a standalone university?
That's correct. And receives separate appropriation funding, separate board of trustees, et cetera.
Thank you. Okay, well, we're now at 11:20 here. Are there any more questions for Dr. McKay from the other three folks left here? Not seeing it, Ed. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ed.
Well,
Thank you so
thank
much.
you all for taking the time and for listening. I very much appreciate the work you do. The legislature establishes the policy for the executive branch to implement, and I know it's in good hands. Whatever this decision may be, I have faith and confidence in the individuals that representing the legislature to make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you. For the rest of the committee right now, then, what we have coming up, and I'll try to make sure, did everybody get, there was a report that was put out that Mike Moffett asked for from the Education Commission of the States. Did you receive that one? He asked the question and they responded, you inquired about state examples of post-secondary system mergers, including those which created a single statewide governance structure. And they responded with a brief, which was 4 pages long, or a little longer than that. If you haven't, I will get that to you.
I got it.
Okay.
It came through to me.
Okay, good. Because at the latter part of that, there were some, they compared to some other states, and I thought their summary, there's a section there on page 3 of that report, which gave an overview of post-secondary institutional mergers with some of the key questions which need to be resolved. That's something we might look at in terms of questions that we might be asking the practitioners, which are going to be with us on Wednesday. The practitioners are those that have been presidents of university colleges, and that, and one of those practitioners is also the chancellor for the community college system today. The other practitioner is Don Burks, who was a chancellor with the Penn State system out in Beirut. That's the Penn State University in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is an engineering school. And there's some very interesting questions that need to be answered regarding that system, because some of the differences in courses that are supposedly transferable are not accepted because they were done at a school which didn't come up with those types of standards that we have been talking about with Ed McKay. So, and then we have Barbara Brittenham coming up on Friday, and Barbara is one that's very familiar with accrediting. In fact, she is the individual with the old NIAS program out of Boston that is seen as misaccrediting for the country. She's it.
Good. That's good.
Yeah.
Rick, I've got a question for Oliver. Oliver, when you were at Lowell, did you say that you guys did go through some kind of a consolidation in your experience?
When we were there originally, the first push was merging Lowell Tech and Lowell State into one university. And then it got caught up into becoming part of UMass Lowell and then the state system, and all of that sort of tumbled one thing into another.
So the tech program and this college program then came together in that merger with UMass?
That's how I became an AFT union president. And when we merged, we agreed to join NEA if I was the president.
Okay.
And that's how we settled that issue with the faculty. And then, so I became then an NEA president. And then I became an ACE fellow and went into college administration.
Okay. All right.
So how long did that merger take place, Oliver? Was it done over how many years?
It wasn't all that long. I mean, it happened fairly fast. I don't remember exactly because I was away for part of it. I'm at the end of it, how much it went, but I remember meeting with the community colleges and haggling out courses and things like that. And they got a new person in from Florida who was all hot and bothered and wanting to push ahead the community colleges. We didn't have any problem with that. We just wanted equatability. And so
how did the CBAs merge, the collective bargaining? What was the
only
impact
one I
there?
was in any part of merging was the one when the university merged, and we worked it out between us. But it was
And,
based,
and did the compensation, was there a leveling of the compensation and benefits?
I was not there for the part,
Okay, all
the
right,
outside, like going to community colleges. I
okay.
was not there when that, because their requirements for credentials are different from the university
Right,
requirements.
yeah,
So, you're getting someone with fewer credentials.
Yeah.
So I wasn't there for that, but I would imagine it still, they're still operating on a community college system and a university system.
So when you
Thanks.
went through all this, Oliver, was there, when that was occurring and working with the community college system, did the community college mission become subordinate to that of the baccalaureate degree programs?
I
And
don't think so. I mean, I had no sense of that at all.
okay, because
And
that's something.
I taught it in Mass Bay and I taught it in HDI, so I'm familiar with those systems.
I think that's a major concern that folks are having,
Yeah.
that, we don't want to lose sight of the certification programs that the community college is doing and those 2-year programs, which are so necessary for regional business.
Yeah, I thought Ed brought an important point, and that's the role of the public higher education oversight committee, the study committee, and its role, its potential role in this thing, which has not been mentioned. I mean, this is the first time he had mentioned it. You and I, Rick, had talked about this before, but it seems to me that this is from a statute standpoint, it is a governing process that needs to be engaged in this thing, I would think.
Yeah, and for our committee members here, I'll give you the statutory reference for that. Because I was looking at this earlier this morning. It's RSA 187-A:28. So 187-A:28, and then there's dash a small a. And basically, here's what it says in the last part of that Public Education Study Committee. There it says the study committee shall be composed of 8 members and shall examine the goals, purposes, organization, and financing of public higher education in New Hampshire, and shall evaluate and make recommendations on the University of New Hampshire, Plymouth State University, Keene State College, Granite State College, and the Community College System of New Hampshire. So that Education Study Committee really has oversight over organization and structure.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
By statute. And
So it seemed to be that any kind of a study committee that's looking at this merger would ultimately have to make some recommendation to that group that would then deal with whatever legislative changes that need to take place.
or if this committee chooses not to engage, I guess we're, defaulting on our obligation to fulfill this duty that's been assigned to us. So I, for one, am going to be contacting Ruth Ward, and because I'm assuming that she is the chair of this committee now, seeing that she's the chair of Senate Education.
Yeah.
It
Also need to check with the speaker, because the speaker is the one who basically makes those appointments to that study committee, and I would assume with the change of administration that there may be a change, because remember, to my surprise, I chaired that last year.
Yeah.
And I would assume there's going to be new people on that. And if that hasn't been appointed, I would assume that he should move
No,
forthwith in getting that.
That's been done, Mel.
Oh, it has.
and-
Okay, good, great. Okay.
So the committee can go ahead, but it has to be called by the Senate.
Yeah,
And
right, exactly.
years ago, there was a time when John Reagan had it.
Yeah.
And then at one point in time, I don't think Ruth was on that, but she
No.
never was chairing it. I think
Yeah.
she was on it during your tenure.
Yes, correct.
And so, and I can remember that when I chaired it, Reagan was on it. And I think D'Alessandro was on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something that we got to get on top of. I think also and we're going to be talking next week on Wednesday with the two individuals, I've mentioned. I'd be looking at that report that comes out of the National Center for Higher Education Management Systems, and those 10 questions on page 27 of that report
Yeah, it's very good.
are very, very good questions. We need to discuss those questions. We also want to look at, some of the information before that, which they deal with these different states that have gone through some of this consolidation. I'd be, interested in really looking at what happened in Minnesota and Connecticut. I'm not too concerned what happened in Alaska. I'm familiar what happened there. And it's just a whole different ballgame than tiny New Hampshire. It doesn't have the geographic issues that we have here. They also didn't really have the demographic issues as well at that time.
So is our role here, Rick, as we move forward on this in the next two meetings, is to come up with a series of questions for Division 2? Exactly what is Representative Umberger looking for our group to give to her? Yeah,
she's looking for basic information and facts and considerations. So we've heard a lot of that today, and I'm going to go back and listen to the streaming here and try to extract from that some of these particular issues that need consideration. We're not going to have resolution today.
No.
And it's impossible. One of the issues that's popping up is timeline. What's the timeline for this transfer, and what are the associated costs to go through a restructure? There's going to be some sideways costs, and that's what I've had that indicated to me by both the community college system and the university system. I don't see that in the budget.
Well, I also thought Ed's comment regarding about suspending the search process is a good one, because frankly, how are they going to get candidates who know that this is possible? How are they going to get good candidates if they know this is possible, knowing full well that there may be a merger here? It just seems to me that this needs to be resolved before any finalization of the selection process for the respective chancellors take place. I
think that what we could do is we could also perhaps have, we could ask to have somebody from the university system come in that might have some answers to, because they're in the process of looking for chancellor right now. So it's the community college system. But and I'm sure Oliver here, having been in this capacity before, would want to know what's the structure, what are going to be my obligations, responsibilities, and duties here. And that could certainly change drastically with the new organizational framework.
I can tell you right now, Rick, you don't want a system in which there's no one in charge and all the presidents report to the legislature or some other dealing with their own deal. It just turns into a dogfight.
Well, that's not what we have exactly right now, but we do not have a strong chancellor CEO system in New Hampshire. Yes, we saw what happened in case of Keene State when they were down with their revenues and needed some help over there. And Todd went over and basically lived at Keene State trying to help them climb out, which Melinda did a great job in doing that. But the chancellor has to be your boss. It has to be the one in which the presidents are underneath the chancellor, in my perspective. But I don't believe that's the way the structure is set up right now.
Oliver, is that your point?
That's pretty much my point. I can remember when we got into competition, one of our branches got into competition with a community college who was giving a bachelor's degree in plumbing. And so that got sorted out by the chancellor.
Well, you also have, not only have the coursework stuff, but one of the concerns I've had is that what's the coordination of the building process, of the capital improvement issues? I mean, how do you
Yeah.
determine within particular institutions, well, that you can put that building here and you can put that building there, but wait a second, we already have that building over here. So, I mean, so we haven't even talked about the capital
no.
improvement issues yet.
And the fact is, you have campuses that if you were starting from scratch, you might not create, but they already exist.
Exactly right, yeah.
And so what do you do with them?
Yeah.
And if you say the word closed in anyone's hearing, it all dissolves into chaos.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right. It's all, there's a lot of ownership.
Oh, yeah.
Rick, I have a question for you or Oliver or Mel, anybody on the call. We're going through sort of the studies in the various states and raising questions, and some plans are here and some are there. Do we have any states that you're aware of that have successfully merged those systems that we can now say, whatever? Nebraska did a great job. Let's look at that and see how they did it. Does anything come to mind for picking out a state or states like that?
I can't honestly tell you that because this is not really my bailiwick, but I got to assume that, yes, restructuring is occurring throughout this country right now, simply because of dollar availability, shrinking demographic, increased competition for those limited pool of students. And we see that in our small region of New England, really see it. Look what happened to the law school here at UNH. They're under attack from law schools in the Boston area for the same student. Our population at the law school was half of what it was several years ago. And with that, you have problems maintaining your professors and your instructors. You just don't have the revenue. So you have to borrow from elsewhere within your university system to maintain that school that can't maintain itself. And that goes back to the question I had earlier regarding the consolidation of certain programs. Have we looked at that? And is that something that needs to be looked at? I don't know.
Because the community colleges, frankly, have done that. I mean, they have diversified their programs to meet the respective needs of their region. So, you don't have a big engine program down in NHTI. You've got that up in the Berlin area. I mean, so I think they've done a pretty good job of trying to diversify their programs to meet the demographics of their particular regional area. So
I think that when we meet with Don Burks next week on Wednesday, Don was, as I mentioned before, in the Pennsylvania system.
Yeah.
And when I went out there and met with the folks in Erie, Pennsylvania last summer, where my grandson was thinking of going to school, that school he was at, the strength of that school was their engineering program in plastics and molding.
Mhm.
And they drew a lot of kids from University Park to go up to Erie. And of course, that's within that Penn State higher education system, which is underneath the Commonwealth system. It's a system that seems to be working and growing, and that is one that they had to go through and retool that back in the 80s. So Don might be able to help us out with that type of question that Art asked. Are there any systems that have gone through this? I know Maine right now is looking at trying to restructure their four-year schools in terms of credits and accreditation. And that's what Barbara Brittenham's going to speak to on Friday of next.
Yeah.
And Barbara's also familiar with some of those other retoolings going on elsewhere in New England. And so is Susan Heward in terms of what happened in Connecticut. And that's in the report right here that we have in front of us.
I thought it was interesting that Ed I think he not only implied, but stated that he didn't think that from a cost savings standpoint, that he didn't think that there would be much cost savings in the merging of it. I mean, there may be some from a policy standpoint and from an institutional standpoint, there may be some merits to bringing together, but I don't think he was saying that don't think that there's going to be any cost savings going on here. So thought that was an interesting comment.
He mentioned that in that
Yeah,
email he sent us, that attachment, he mentions the FAR program.
yeah,
And that's something we may want to get some more information on
Yeah.
in terms of where are these synergies right now? And unfortunately, we just don't have the time here.
Yeah.
We may be able to get somebody to come in. If we're looking at next Friday, we have Barbara Brittenham. Maybe we can park somebody else in there and maybe do the same thing and make a larger conference type thing, either on Wednesday too, with Don and with Susan. And maybe we could get, Catherine Provencher's also one that's as a previous treasurer of our state.
Yeah.
And now the interim chancellor, maybe it'd be wise to ask, and I spoke with Catherine last night, and she's open to working with us.
she's very good. She's very
So
good.
maybe what I'll do is on the day that we're next Wednesday, I'll call up Catherine and find out if there's somebody there can help us a little bit with some of this financial information. Now, remember also that right now there is a briefing going on with the Division 2.
Right, yeah.
And then they're going to have a briefing on Monday regarding the unique program.
Yeah, I think we need to realize that we're not going to do the study.
That's exactly right. I understand that.
All we can do is kind of say, here are some issues that need to be looked at before we go down this road. And I think,
Well, and we can also identify this quote laundry list of issues,
right,
but recommend these issues to our higher education committee that
right, yeah,
we have
right, yeah.
statutory authority for.
Yeah.
And for a resolution, also you send it off to Division 2 and say, here's, some policy issues from the policy committee.
Right, exactly,
We
yeah.
believe need answers.
Okay, good.
I'm not taking one side or the other on this whole thing right now. I'm
No.
pretty neutral on it. I just feel like I'm out in left field still. I'm not even maybe in the field. I'm out
Yeah,
with a
right.
fence.
They're still trying to buy the ticket to get in.
That's exactly right. Oliver, you got your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to ask you if you could contribute anything about the Alaska experience, which seems to have been something that took an awful lot of tinkering with to get it to work.
Well, what happened up in Alaska, that the governor of state, Don Hammond, we had some issues, and also the geography of Alaska. You have Southeast Alaska, which is down on that arm, which goes down towards Washington, Seattle area. And then you have the rest of the state, which is just gigantic. You could place Alaska right on top of the lower 48. We also had in the latter part of the 80s, the time when the oil glut occurred in the country, and Alaska is a singular economy based upon oil. The fishing industry is basically dead. And when oil revenues went down, a barrel of oil went down and sank well below $50 a barrel. The revenues coming into the state, which supported education, took a drastic cut. So all of a sudden, there was fewer dollars available for UAF, University of Alaska Fairbanks, which is their flagship campus, much like our UNH, and UAA, University of Alaska Anchorage, which is situated right in Anchorage and draws a lot of folks from that, where half the folks in Alaska live. And then you had at that time, you had the University of Southeast Alaska. Now that's called University of Southern Alaska, I guess, or something such as that. They've remolded that. But that system had to change. The demographics, the community college also had to change. Community colleges were only used to be, when I was there, just a singular building in a remote community. And it was oriented at the skill certificates and skill training that, and not even at the level of the certificate that we're talking about here in New Hampshire. We're talking about subsistence type oriented cultures and trying to provide another route towards daily life through education. So it's a successful program, but it's very tailored to the remoteness of Alaska.
Okay.
We, through UNH, do research with UAF. Poker Flats is where they put those missiles up to study the Aurora Borealis. Our folks down in Durham are part of that program. So we do work cooperatively with UAF. I would, in that report, I'd be really curious to learn a little bit more about the Connecticut model than what happened in Minnesota, in states which have more in common with New Hampshire.
Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Hey, guys,
So-
thanks a lot, Rick.
Yeah. So
Hey,
everybody,
Rick, can you hear me?
Yeah,
yes, I can, Mike.
Yeah, real quick. Hello. I've been on for a little bit. As you know, I was at the county meeting. I saw Mel there and I saw Dave. So anyway, real quick, Jennifer had sent me a message asking for the ECS material that I had received from ECS,
Yeah.
which I can get to her. But Rick, were you able, did you get that from me or were you able to, did anybody else?
yeah, we got it.
Yes,
Oh, good. Okay.
I mentioned that, Mike. I mentioned the ECS material along with the sheets we got from the community college system are really informative. I did mention that you had asked that question to provide us examples of post-secondary mergers elsewhere in the country. And on the bottom of page 1, it had, I'm looking at it right now as we're speaking, objectives of system mergers may include but the following, and listed 5 real critical points. I think those 5 critical points are points that we should be all looking at. The first one is improve coordination and alignment across the institutions. Coordination and alignment, that's important. The second part is achieve cost savings and efficiencies. Ed McKay talked about efficiencies and cost savings, but we should continue to hammer on that one as well. Number 3, expand access to credential and degree programs and academic courses. We talked about certification programs at the community college, the different types of programs offered. And the fourth one is streamline credit transfers. We spent some good time on transfers between various levels of education here. And the fifth one was increase the flexibility of institutions to respond to changes in student and workforce demands. That is where the community college is really nimble right now, working with regional business. The UNH is looking for those bigger institution corporations, and they also are working with those large corporations. However, small business is really attached to community colleges. So those 5 areas mentioned in your ECS materials you got are really key for us to follow those broad elements with further questions.
And I've been going through the paperwork that Jennifer put together that you sent out. There's a lot there, and I have some notes. And once I get Jennifer's notes and I see what you touched on today, I'll try to get caught up. As you know, I did spend 20 years in the community system and 7 years in the university system, plus 5 years as an undergrad. I guess I was on the 5-year plan. So anyway, I have some personal history in both systems that hopefully will be a little bit useful. So I'll try to get caught up and sorry I missed a lot of what was there today, but I will try to get caught up.
That's okay, Mike. When you're also looking at the reports, look at the consolidation of post-secondary systems. That report, which was, I don't know how you say the term, NECHMS, National Center for Higher Education Management Systems, was requested to do a report for the community college system. On page 27 of that report, there's 10 questions. Those 10 questions are good questions for us to keep up on our heads. So when we meet with Don Burks next week and with Susan Heward, we try to, ask those questions and try to, get information back. We're not going to be able to make any resolutions or determinations, but we can at least get these policy statements and facts down so we share it with Division 2. Also, Mike, I don't know if you heard our last part of the discussion where we're talking about an RSA 187, which speaks specifically to the Public Higher Education Study Committee. We have a legislative committee tasked with the responsibilities for looking at the organization and structure of our post-secondary education systems.
It's already there.
It's already in statute. So what we should be doing as a result of this subcommittee work is taking some of the findings and facts that and questions which we have noting it and sending written comment to that committee as well as Division 2.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
for further study on their part.
Okay, great.
Okay, boys. Okay.
Yeah,
Have a good weekend.
yeah, everybody enjoy the summer weather.
Stay off Zoom for at least a couple days.
I'm going to try to, and I hope everybody else does the same. And I won't call that thing an elk, a deer anymore. I know it's an elk, Oliver.
Okay,
Everybody take care.
the bear hides on the other wall.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.